Yesterday was an incredible day of initially framing the issues. We covered everything from why people join violent extremist groups to this kind of bigger question of how one justifies becoming violent at the time, how one justifies leaving violence. We looked at de-radicalization. We looked across different extremes. We heard a lot of perspectives. As we mentioned at the very beginning of the summit, Google Ideas is a think/do tank. And I also mentioned at the very beginning that we didn't bring you here just to have interesting conversations. So I thought I'd use the beginning of today to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about outputs, how we're thinking about the next step. Because today is a combination of looking at a particular successful case study in Colombia, looking at a few more issues, and then spending a lot of time in breakout teams until we go tomorrow into a Formers and Survivors all-day session. There's 3 different tracks through which we're pursuing outputs. The first is, as I mentioned, this has been an 8-month process at Google Ideas and CFR and Tribeca in terms of thinking about the summit and who we bring together and what we want to accomplish here. So through our conversations with different people that have been involved, we've begun to get some hypotheses around what kinds of things people think would be useful. So what we've tried to do is, at least at Google, roll up our sleeves and try to build some things that we can roll out as kind of initial beta versions that tomorrow during the Formers and Survivors meeting we can iterate on and have be useful to the larger community. So one thing that's going to be going live later today is a Formers YouTube channel. And the reason for that is because what we heard from a lot of the different Formers is we don't have a place to go and say that we've left violent extremism and talk about what we're doing instead. The work we're doing at the grassroots level. And I can't remember who exactly it was, but one person mentioned it would be great if we could start cataloging how many people are going to one place and renouncing violent extremism. So what we've got is this Formers YouTube channel that tomorrow we're going to get lots of feedback on and hopefully iterate on over time. And if we're successful, it will be a place that has the largest repository of videos of individuals renouncing violent extremism and talking about their path away from it, and now what they're doing. In that spirit, we also have YouTube booths in the hallway, and so we encourage you to go and do a video testimony that can be uploaded onto this site. We've also developed an againstviolentextremism.org website, which is live in a very, very early stage. For the same reason that we want to learn from all of you what needs to be on it and how we can make it useful. Part of the logic behind developing this site and getting this site live is because we talk about formers and survivors, but there's an important piece of this, which is the former and survivor label is the label for the experience. But what I want to make sure everybody in this room knows is every former and every survivor in this room is working at an NGO that they founded, working with an NGO that they believe in that is focused specifically on countering violent extremism. So every former and survivor who's here is not just somebody with an interesting experience and an important experience and a credible voice. They're somebody who's already rolling up their sleeves and trying to do something about the challenge. So just by show of hands. By show of hands, how many of you either run an NGO or are involved with an NGO working against violent extremism? It's a lot of hands. And there's a lot of people, too, who are still coming in who I know would raise their hands as well. Now, the problem I have is all those hands that were raised today, there's not a single place where you can go to find out what work they're doing, what NGOs they're working on, the positive activism and action, as Jill Hicks reminds me this morning, that people are doing day to day. And before we start, I mean, there's the outputs that are going to come out of the summit, but there's the outputs that are already a reality. That need to be organized and put in one place. And so hopefully this website will be the beginnings of an opportunity to showcase all the different efforts that are already underway, because all of them together are so much more powerful than in isolation. A couple other sort of avenues through which we're generating outputs are the team sessions. Yesterday I mentioned we've divided everybody up here into 19 different teams of 9 to 12 people. Already those ideas are coming out of the team sessions. They were narrowed down to 2 ideas for each group yesterday, and they're going to be announced at the end of today, and we're all going to vote on them, and the top 3 ones are going to actually get some awards based on specific commitments, but we're going to drive all of them forward. And then the third sort of avenue for pursuing outputs that I never anticipated until really the summit got started is just the organic collaborations that would begin to happen. Whether it's here, whether it was at the dinner last night, the reception, the opening night, both me and my team keep having people come up to us saying, here's the collaboration that I'm doing with this other former, or this other survivor, or this NGO, or that NGO. Let me tell you what's happening. And it's so overwhelming and so hard to document as people are coming up and telling us about it, that we want to make sure that all of the organic partnerships that are being developed are put in one place so we can make sure that we do everything we can to have them come to fruition. So again, the YouTube booths are a great vehicle for doing this. Go into the YouTube booths and tell us what you're doing that you hadn't thought about doing before you came here. Tell us about the person that you're working with that you wouldn't have worked with unless you came here. Tell us what kind of action you've decided to do. A couple examples of this. I learned this morning that Nur Huda Ismail from Indonesia, as well as some of the formers from Los Angeles, as well as Christian, have all realized that they've had a common experience in terms of entrepreneurship, breaking down perceptions of hate. Nur with the restaurant business, Christian with his record business, and a number of the formers from LA talked about how there are certain restaurants that are actually run by formers. And so they're looking at kind of building a network of people who have used business to break down stereotypes of hate and how they can push that forward. With Tribeca, we're going to be doing a documentary, which we'll talk more about later. Not on the summit, but what happens after the summit, to make sure that sort of the collaborations that began here are documented going forward. There's a lot more that I can say about outputs. There's one more that I want to mention right now. It's going to be a theme throughout the course of the day. But also we have Mark Seliger, who's a world-famous photographer who's set up on this floor and is going to be taking portraits throughout the day. And the logic behind this is we want to do gigantic installations around the world of credible voices against violent extremism and put them in places where people would not expect to see them and where people need to see that there's faces against violent extremism, because the words aren't enough. The words matched with all of you are what makes it meaningful. So with that, and the recognition of the fact that the theme of today is outputs, although we're going to continue to sort of learn about different experiences, let's begin.